All right. It is October 10th, 2023. Welcome. We will begin with a 20-minute sit, for which I will provide a certain amount of guidance and a certain amount of quiet. And then we'll see what happens after that. Okay. So I'm going to mute everybody just in case anybody's not muted. So settling in to a posture that supports your awareness and supports settling and calm. You can close your eyes or just lower your gaze. Turning the attention inward. So first, just tuning into the body, feeling any obvious sensations, feeling how you are holding your body, feeling the breath moving in the body. And then noticing just what mood or mental state is present. Acknowledging that, not judging or trying to change how you feel, and letting the attention come to rest on the breath. We can put our attention either at the nostrils, where we can feel the air moving in and out of the body, or focus on the movement of the belly or the chest. We're not trying to shut out other experiences or suppress thinking. Rather use the breath as a way of grounding the attention in the present moment. When the attention wanders, when you notice that you're caught up in thinking, you can just gently guide the attention back to the breath. You may find some thoughts are particularly persistent or troubling. And for these, we might give a little more attention just to see what's going on in the mind, in the heart. And then again, coming back, not spending a lot of time with the thoughts or analyzing or judging, just seeing clearly into the mind, and then coming back to the simplicity of breath, the present moment. When there's a lot of energy in the mind, then the thoughts just sweep through. It can seem impractical to even try to pay attention to the breath. And we don't want to get into a conflict with the thinking. But we can sometimes work with different perspectives, the perspective perhaps of just allowing the thoughts to move through while maintaining just a certain degree of attention on the breath, not trying to absorb into the breath, but just feeling that you are breathing even as thoughts persist. So this is a kind of dual kind of attention and of balance between the body and the breath, mind and thoughts. And what might be most important in this process is this attitude of non-contention or not resisting. We could call this acceptance. Not fighting with our own mind, not judging our own mind. And this attitude is the one most likely to bring about a calming. It's not through effort or striving that the mind settles, but rather through non-conflict, through letting go. right. Welcome, everyone. Found your way to the new Zoom link. Yeah. A little dazed myself. Um, and yeah, thought I would read a little bit from Ajahn Amaro's book, Finding the Missing Piece. This is chapter 5, called Wisdom and Compassion. We tend to think of compassion as a state of empathy. Oftentimes, when we feel compassion for other people or other beings, we experience suffering along with them. As mentioned before, the word compassion in English literally means to suffer with. In contrast, the Buddhist concept of compassion involves a profound and complete empathy, but not suffering along with the other person. The Buddha pointed out that if you experience suffering because of your practice of compassion toward another, you haven't got it quite right. In true compassion, the way it's practiced in Buddhism, one feels profound empathy for the suffering of other beings, yet one is not experiencing suffering oneself. As with many areas of Buddhist practice in the Western English-speaking Judeo-Christian mindset, there is no conceptual framework or word that quite encompasses that idea. Empathy is close, but the Buddhist concept is much more extensive than that. So to understand compassion in the Buddhist sense, we have to describe how this quality works, and then just let a sense of its meaning formulate within us. One of the best ways of getting an insight into compassion is by using imagery from the Northern Buddhist tradition, which includes Buddhism as practiced in China, Japan, Tibet, and Korea. A key figure in their spiritual life and practice is the figure of Kuan Yin, often represented as an elegant feminine figure. Her full name in Chinese is Kuan Shi Yin, which literally means the one who listens to the sounds of the world. In Sanskrit, the name is Avalokiteshvara, meaning the one who regards the sounds of the world. So the name embodies the real spirit of what is meant by compassion in Buddhism, the listening heart that can attend to all things, that receives and takes in the beautiful as well as the ugly, the painful and the difficult. The heart is attentive to and knows and allows all the aspects of life without reacting to them. The heart does not get swept away by the beautiful, swamped by the painful or the ugly, carried off on a tide of tears for the pain that other beings are experiencing. The heart fully listens and attends to it all. In Buddhist iconography, Kuan Yin is the bodhisattva, the embodiment of compassion. In the Buddhist world, icons or religious statues, such as a Buddha figure on a shrine, are revered. Buddhists respect Gautama Buddha as the teacher. But the point of Buddhist practice is to internalize what these images represent. If one does not internalize the qualities of these enlightened beings, the practice becomes ineffective and is missing the real point. It's not just a matter of looking at external beings or objects and idolizing them, or looking up to a compassionate ideal. The main point is to internalize the compassionate ideal and discover that quality, the listening heart, within ourselves, to cultivate and develop that. In a sense, this quality of compassion involves identifying with the whole universe, with all other beings, feeling that everything is self, expanding the heart to include everything. One creates an empathy or an identification with an attunement to all things. That said, this principle may be confusing in light of the wisdom teachings. With the development of wisdom, one takes the opposite approach, which is to consider that nothing is self. This apparent contradiction is true to form, for even during the Buddha's lifetime, there were people from different sects who complained, it's impossible to get a straight answer out of the Buddha or his disciples. One way to hold these seeming contradictions is to see wisdom and compassion as being like the wings of a bird. We need to have both of these elements. The word Lama in Tibetan, as in Dalai Lama, which means spiritual teacher or figure, illustrates this. La comes from the Tibetan word for wisdom, and Ma comes from the word for compassion. These two qualities are reflected right in the very name for a teacher. The third Zen patriarch from China said, in this world of suchness, there is neither self nor other than self, thus pointing to the mysterious, ineffable reality that we are. So we can look at it from the side of compassion and say, everything is self. I am the universe. What I am is connected to everything in the universe, mental and physical. We are not just isolated entities, but we are connected with all of nature, to all things through the natural order, both physical and mental. So it starts another section called Wisdom and Compassion Working Together. I'll read a little of this. The counterpoint of the idea that everything is self is that nothing is self. There is nothing one can point to that is truly and absolutely the essence of what one is as an individual. So the wisdom teachings emphasize this aspect of the nature of reality. Suppose I hold up my hand and say, I'm pointing to the left. You're facing me and you say, no, you're pointing to the right. We are both looking at the same thing, but from different perspectives. It is like the left wing and the right wing of a bird. They are the opposites of each other, mirror images of each other, yet their shape is also identical. Wisdom and compassion work like this. In a way, they are mirror images of each other, but they emanate from the same source. They are like the wings of a bird, which the bird needs in order to fly, and both of which emerge from the body of the bird. So this is, I think, both confusing and helpful teaching, but it, we can see that it's grounded in the principle of a middle way, right? That it's not about latching onto a single idea and taking that as the sole source of our spiritual practice and the sole form of guidance. In fact, that's one of the great risks in spiritual practice, is becoming attached to some element of the practice itself. It's a very common problem, especially when we first engage in any kind of practice, and certainly the same applies with recovery. certainly there are many people that are attached to the 12 steps as the sole way to deal with addiction. And when they see someone trying a different path, they assume that the person will relapse, that they'll fail. And so I think what Ajahn Amaro is helping us with is the sense of open-mindedness and inquiry, to really ask, what is the result of this particular perspective? And what is the risk of this perspective? We could say, what are the benefits and what are the risks of any given perspective? And I don't think it's a matter of attaining, the middle way as this perfect straight line that we're right in perfect balance all the time. Like everything else, balance is impermanent. And so it's quite natural that we are going to tip in different ways at different times. And that can be actually a very natural and helpful way of working with our practice. At times we may find in this model that we are drawn more towards compassion and we were working in that area. And then other times we'll see, oh, I really need to let go. I'm really more interested in working with wisdom, with ideas like emptiness or not self, exploring impermanence. So these are both really valuable areas to dive into. And I think that when we come into a kind of maturity or fulfillment of these two wings, that there's a way in which they blend together. Wisdom protects us from the extremes of compassion in which we might give ourselves away. Compassion protects us from the extremes of compassion, of wisdom, in which we become detached in an unwholesome way. The idea of emptiness, for instance, or not self, can be taken as an excuse for passivity and disengagement. It can be used as a way of denying karma. Well, everything is empty and there is no self. So, if I get drunk, it's just a drunken Buddha, which was a form of delusion that I indulged in at one time. But again, we can find ourselves drenched in compassion to the point that we are overwhelmed. And as Ajahn Amaro points to, we, instead of just bringing care to other people's suffering, we start to suffer ourselves. And this is, I think also a very natural place to fall into when we look at the suffering of the world. Certainly these past few days, there's been tremendous suffering that we were exposed to if we're looking at the news. Not that there isn't always tremendous suffering, but it's been particularly prevalent and highlighted, and how to respond to that with compassion and wisdom is a great challenge. Near the enemy of compassion is really hatred or not caring at all. The near enemy is pity, but the far enemy is really not caring and shutting down, apathy, and it's easy when we get barraged by images and information about suffering to go to one of those extremes, to go to the place of just being overwhelmed with emotion or of shutting down. And then there's the great tendency to blame or to take sides. And so all of these aspects become challenging, and wisdom becomes even more important. The Buddha's core teachings, when he talks about the tendencies of people to fall into greed, hatred, and delusion, are really important to keep in mind, to see that the behaviors of human beings in 2023 are not different from the behavior of people at the time of the Buddha. The Buddha himself was consulted by leaders of his time, King Pasenadi, King Ajatasattu, asking whether they should go to war against their neighbors. And the Buddha actually laid out guidelines. But of course, he was, never really, suggesting war. But just the very fact that he had to face that, and that he saw in human beings these driving forces, tells us that really nothing has changed. That these forms of hatred and violence have been with us for millennia. So that's the wisdom. The wisdom that we are not living in some special time. These aren't shocking events when one understands these underlying tendencies. And the Buddha is offering us the solution to this. And it's not, some complicated solution. It's just humans are not willing to take that step. That, I think, is where our own practice meets these realities, because greed, hatred, and delusion are not just out there, right? They're not just things that happen between countries. They are inside us. And seeing the difficulty that each of us has in letting go of grasping, of wanting, of craving, of letting go of judging, of opinions, of taking a stance, of anger and resentment, of letting go of our passivity, our withdrawal, our escapism. We see that this is not easy. Even those of us who have dealt with, major disruptions in our lives of addiction find that that less disruptive but nonetheless unwholesome mind states persist. And in some ways, the more attuned we become through our meditation, the more aware of this we become. And this can become a huge challenge in our meditation practice as we work to uproot these qualities. And we discover these ideals and discover this and realize this potential, and yet see our own shortcomings in our efforts to change and to grow, to let go. It's very difficult to avoid the kind of persistent self-judgment that can come along with that, and really takes a lot of care to keep diving in, to diving into self-examination, to the work of letting go, to the cultivation of love and compassion, while facing the resistance, the inner resistance to all of that. I taught a day long for the Sati Center on Saturday, and actually they sent me a link to the recording. I'm going to look for it, unless Monica, you wanted to look that up. But here it is. I've got it. Well, okay, here we go. But as often happens when goodness, it's quite a link. It's a little bit too much of a link. I don't think that can possibly be the right link. I'm just going to, see if you can find it. Just the Sati Center, SATI, and it was a day on living kindness. Anyway, you guys are, Google friendly. But what I wanted to mention was, as often happens with my teaching, some things sort of came up in the process, and I started out the day by doing something I'd never done before, which just arose organically, which was using mindfulness of the body and combining it with the 4 Brahma Viharas. And so this can be applied to things beyond the body, but to start with loving kindness towards the body, thinking of the breath as an act of kindness towards the body, thinking of relaxing and mindfulness as an act of loving kindness, and then compassion for the body, and recognizing in this process the self-judgment that each of us has about our bodies. No doubt at different stages of our life, we have different thoughts, but about our bodies, and at different points in our lives, there may be more positive thoughts than at other points. But I think there's just so often a striving for something to be different about our body. And it's just so interesting to look at this conflict, within our own mind about our body. And of course, and we have the same problem with our mind, right? More of a problem with our mind. But interesting though, to apply loving kindness and compassion, and then mudita, sympathetic joy, but I would bring in especially appreciation and gratitude for our body. So we can apply the same to our mind, and indeed to our own spiritual practice. Again, we might sort of be comparing ourselves. Well, so-and-so, Ajahn Amaro is more enlightened than me, why can't I be more spiritual like him? But we could also say, wow, like, here I am trying to meditate, like that's a very wholesome activity. It's a very positive activity that many people do not do. Most people do not do. Here I am dealing with my addictive behaviors and habits. And, I'm in recovery from that, or I'm, trying to get into recovery from that. Well, that's a very wholesome thing. So you guys know me well enough to know that I'm not like somebody who just like puts a positive spin on everything. But it's also really important to acknowledge the goodness in ourselves and to appreciate that. So, this is again to me about finding a balance. And if we go to the 12 steps, I think that the 12-step inventory work can sometimes overwhelm the positive aspects of recovery and take us sort of out of appreciating ourselves. And this, I think, is equally important to inventory. Certainly being honest about our shortcomings and all of that, vital, and staying on track and trying to behave in constructive and loving and compassionate ways and wise ways, really important. But at some point we also have to acknowledge, like, wow, like I'm doing some good work, and it's not so much comparing ourselves to the rest of the world, but it doesn't hurt to kind of look at this idea that the world is driven by greed, hatred, and delusion and realize that maybe those impulses are still within you, but you're actually trying to do something about them. You're not using them as your guiding principles the way many people do, So I've brought us around to the idea of something positive. So I think that's a good place for me to stop. Yeah, I appreciate you guys showing up, and I apologize again for the switch up with the Zoom, and I'm glad people found their way here. And we have some time left for any thoughts and reflections, comments. Oh, Steve, hi.
Good morning, Kevin. Thank you for this teaching this morning. I've taken in so much of what you talked about. This whole concept of the middle way is, for me, is going to be my survival tool. I've been really challenged lately with, I have a friend that's just, when I think about what's going on, not only in our country, but around the world, I'm trying to think, well, maybe I need to get more into the middle way. I've got a friend that's so far to the right, and he's trying to convert me, and it's just barraging me with text messages to the point where I just don't know if I can be his friend anymore. And it's really hurtful. It hurts me. I've known this man for 45 years. He's an old musician friend of mine, and I played in a lot of bands with him. I mean, I can get really emotional about this, but what you talked about today is maybe I'm a little too far this way. Maybe I could find something in what he's trying to say to me, but I'm struggling with that. But this whole teaching on the middle way is, for me, I'll just say I have never been so grateful in my life to have finally found a teaching and a pathway that can help keep me sane.
Yeah.
Because I spent my entire life in the 12-step program. And being an empath, I'm just so damn emotional all the time. And I just sometimes I can't deal with that. So I have to find the middle way. And, I've been thinking about, you're going to be leaving soon. And I thought, man, Kevin's going to be gone for 6 weeks. There's a part of me that I don't want you to go, but at the same time, I'm so looking forward to your return after 6 weeks of this retreat and the things that you can learn and the things that you can come back and teach us. So I just wanted to share that. And I look forward to hearing what you have to say when you get back from your experience. And thank you for this morning's teachings. It really, really helped me a tremendous amount. And it's just wonderful to be with this little sangha of people that I believe kind of think the way I think, and we're
Mm.
trying to find that middle way to have some peace. So thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, there is a thing called block that you can, block a number. I'm
Yeah, I
sorry you're
know.
having to deal with that. That's tough, man. Really tough. Yeah.
Kevin, what book did you read out of for
Oh, yeah. So it's called Finding the Missing Piece, Peace, by Ajahn Amaro. It is available as an ebook. I'll put the name in the chat. It should be on the Amaravati website as an ebook. Amaravati.org. Yes. That's the monastery in England where he's the abbot. And you can usually download a PDF or other kind of formats. I have it. I don't know if I have this one on my Kindle, but you can certainly get it on Kindle. Yeah, it's just kind of an introduction to Buddhist meditation, but I'm a big fan of introductory teachings. I don't really like advanced teachings. They like, I mean, it's kind of like just keep coming back to the breath. It's like there's not that much more I feel I need to do. But yeah, it's a beautiful teaching there. Mike, hi.
Yeah, hi, Kevin.
Hey.
Good to see you. This was a good teaching for me this morning because
For some reason, your volume just dropped suddenly.
oh,
You're not muted, but I can't hear you.
okay. I guess I'll try and fix it and come back in later.
Well, if you lean in like that, I can hear you.
Oh, all right. I'll I'll bring up my own volume. So anyway, I'm having a hard time with my brother who's struggling with, he's in a really bad stage of alcoholism, and
Yeah.
he just got out of treatment like a week ago, and he's already drinking again, and
Oh,
it's kind of breaking my heart. And so this teaching of like you were reading, the heart does not get swept away by the beautiful, swamped by the painful or the ugly, carried off on a tide of tears for the pain that other beings are experiencing. It's a good time for me to hear that, just using the wisdom to temper the compassion, it's a good thing. So good time to cover some of the teachings of Amaro. So thanks.
well, yeah. And, even as I started reading, I thought, I want to talk about self-compassion. And I didn't really come around to doing that because by the time I finished reading, I kind of had lost that thread. But this is, I don't know if it's, anyway, I think self-compassion is a critical piece of compassion. The rest of it, in a way, is relatively easy. Self-compassion is the hard work because it's inside us, the suffering. And, our inner life is complicated and is confusing, and how to, just on a practical level, how to be kind to yourself is a tricky question, whether it's, feeling like, oh, I have to worry about my brother, and then finding that, you're getting, as you said, swamped by those feelings. Or then you feel like, oh, well, I need to detach. And then you realize, wow, now I'm kind of shutting down. Like that's not helpful. Um, it's we're trying to bring compassion to the same person who is having the suffering. I mean, the same person is trying to give the compassion that's having the suffering, and so that's a very tricky perspective to maintain. To be able to breathe with and feel our suffering, and then bring an attitude, a point of view, which cares for that. And so there is this capacity, a meditative capacity, to calm and bring a peaceful state to that suffering. But it's not a pill. It's not an injection. It's not like we could just make it happen. It's a process, and it involves letting in the pain, and at times the pain is going to get stronger than our capacity to bring a calming state to it. Anyway, I'm not maybe giving them a great deal of guidance, but just really pointing to the challenge of it. I just think that fundamentally it's really important that we view self-compassion as equally important to compassion for others, that they're partners, rather than, oh, I'll bring in a little bit of that. But no, that needs to be a very strong guiding principle. Ultimately, I don't feel like that my compassion for others is that meaningful if there isn't compassion for myself in equal measure. So, in any case, it's a lot. I think I'm in a bit of a state myself today. So,
All right. Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, self-compassion is definitely important in this situation. Part of the wisdom I think he's talking about it, and being able to keep from being swept away. Yeah, self-compassion. Thanks.
Yep. All right. So this Friday is the Spirit Rock class that I do once a month. And then I'll be here next Tuesday and the following Friday, and then I will be departing for 6 weeks of meditation retreat. But there will be, these sessions will continue. At times there will be a substitute teacher, Debbie and Anne and Walt and Greg, all are going to take spots. And then Angela and Monica are going to hold the space anytime there isn't a teacher. So there'll be, I've suggested maybe doing some readings and sharing and sitting together. So I really do hope that people will continue to come and for your own practice. And the retreat ends on December 5th. And that's a Tuesday. On the following Friday will be a Spirit Rock class, and then I will resume these classes on December 12th. So hope to see you all along the way. And I see Monica has asked me to hang out a little bit, so we're going to have a little business meeting. So I will say au revoir.
Oh, wow.
Farewell,